Chapter 55. Terrible feng shui here. Worst I ever saw. You two crazy? Because of... Dixon indicating behind him, in thickening dusk, the vista sweeping away. It acts as a conduit for what we call sha, or, as they say in Spanish California, bad energy. Imagine a wind, a truly ill wind, bringing failure, poverty, disgrace, betrayal, every kind of bad luck there is, all blowing through, night and day, with many times the force of the worst storm you were ever in. No one intends to live directly upon the vista, Mason speaking as to a child, the object being that the people shall set their homes to one side or the other, that it be a boundary, nothing more. Boundary! The Chinaman begins to pull upon his hair and paw the earth with brocade slippered feet. Everywhere else on earth, boundaries follow nature, coastlines, ridge tops, riverbanks, so honouring the dragon or shan within, from which landscape ever takes its form. To mark a right line upon the earth is to inflict upon the dragon's very flesh a sword slash, a long perfect scar, impossible for any who live out here the year round to see as other than hateful assault. How can it pass unanswered? This is the third continent he has been doing feng shui jobs on, and he thought he had seen crazy people in Europe, but these are beyond folly. Whig country homes, sinister chateaux, Adriatic villas, Hungarian hot springs, Danish harems in the Turkish style, not one of their owners having hired him out of respect for the dragon, nor for what he could do or find out or even tell them, when 'twas not innocently to indulge a fascination with the exotic, 'twas to permit themselves yet one more hope in the realm of the subjunctive. One more grasp at the last radiant whispers of the last bites of rope hem, billowing ether driven at the back of an ever-departing deity. A people without faith. Very well, he could understand it, now and then even respect it. Yet here in America is little but faith. Church spires on every town skyline, travelling ministers who draw congregations by the hundreds and thousands, across flooded pastures, beneath rain-combed skies, and under the outspread wings of their white tents, singing far off in the woods, full of fervent, strange harmonies that grow louder as the traveller approaches. Frowning at his lue pan, the mystic Chinaman shakes his head and mutters, "Even the currents of earth are with them." Them? I have enemy in these parts, I believe, a certain Jesuit who does not wish me well. French? Inquires Mason. Spanish, I believe. Father Zapazo, the Wolf of Jesus, as he is known in his native land, though I had the misfortune to meet him in my own. He has his training directly from those who persecuted Molinos and his followers. He is accordingly sworn to destroy all who would seek God without passing through the toll gate of Jesus. The Molinistas, as do certain Buddhists of my own land, believed that the most direct way to the deity was to sit quietly. If this meant using Jesus as but a stage on a journey, or even passing him by, why, so be it. Buddhists speak of finding it necessary, if the Buddha be blocking one's way, to kill him. Jesuits do not like to hear this sort of thing, of course. It puts far too much into question. If access to God need not be by way of Jesus, what is to become of Jesuits? And the sheer amount of silence required, do you think they could ever abide that? Zapazzo is relentless in his hatred of those he hunts down, as they are indifferent in their love of God to the passions driving him. Jansenist convulsionaries, crypto-illuminati, and neo-quietists alike have felt his cultivated wrath, some taken before dawn by men in black, others accosted brazenly upon the steps of cathedrals, clapped into iron and leather restraints, going along amiably enough, puzzled, sure it must be a mistake. European docility. No one with power has ever underappreciated its comforts. So you may imagine the loss of morale among visitors such as Padre Zapazzo before the fact of China, as they see how far from docility they have journeyed, and what they have come into the midst of. Wild Chinamen! How could they ever have deemed us ready for their Jesus? Somehow feng shui became their principal enemy. Without it in the world, is this what they believed? Jesus would have a better chance of finding converts in China? Accordingly, 'twould be a holy service to destroy feng shui. Zhang adverts to his lure pan, and with fingers unhesitating proceeds to move various of its rings forward and retrograde. Dixon, happening by, is drawn by the instrument. Another needleman, so there's two of us. I hope Mason's not troubling thee upon the topic. He is unusually loyal to heavenly methods, is all. You would find even more congenial a disciple of the Fujian school, whose faith in the needle is absolute, whereas I am of the Kanchue school, which places the dragon of the land above all else. Come, look, see here. These are the moon stations, the stars fixed and moving, signs of the zodiac. We use all that. But first comes the dragon, and what the needle responds to is the dragon's very life. What Mason can't abide is that it never points to what he calls true north, as if the needles were false north. Zapazzo as well. His vows include one sworn to 0 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds, or perfect north. He is the Lord of the zero. The impurity of this earth keeps him driven in a holy rage, which is why he wants this visto. Wants? News of the visto will bring him surely as a gaze brings a suitor. Purity of azimuth is his passion. He was in Italy when your sponsor, Lemaire, was producing the line from Rome to Rimini. He was in Peru with La Condamine, and in Lapland with Beaujeu. 'Tis his destiny to inflict these telluric injuries, as 'tis mine to resist them." "I didn't know that." "Thee come here, then, to oppose our mission, to seek our failure. Why, sir, what possible ill motive can we be serving in marking out this tiny bit of lesser circle?" Once Monsieur Allegra had as little hesitation in slicing straight through the carcasses of animals and viewing aesthetically the patterns of bone and fat and flesh thus exposed. Now, no longer. Heaven has permitted him to see the distinction between blade and body, the aggressive exactitude of one, the helpless indeterminacy of the other. In that difference lies the potency of the sin. But that's Jesuit talk, Captain. The felled trees aren't just lying there unused. There are plenty of Americans but a short trip away who come and fetch them for firewood or fences or building logs. How can thou think so ill of this line? A fellow surveyor? I cannot imagine it." "Fret not. My business is with the Jesuit. We happen to be the principal personae here, not you two. Nor has your line any primacy in this, being rather a stage setting, dark and fearful as the battlements of Elsinore, for the struggle Zarpazzo and I must exact upon the very mortal edge of this great torrent of Shah, which at any moment either of us might slip, fall into, and be borne away by, westward into the vanishing point, and gone. And Mason and I, bystanders, background, stage managers of that perilous flux, little more. Dixon thinks about it. Well, it's no worse than Copernicus, is it? The centre of it all, moving someplace else like that. Better not mention this to Mason. Padre Zarpazzo being a master of disguise, Captain Zhang, by now half insane anyway, becomes convinced that the priest has actually penetrated the camp, and only waits his moment to administer that poisoned stiletto preferred by a Jesuit confronting error. It's got to be an axeman, the captain decides. They come and go with entire freedom. Each possesses a rifle and a choice of blades. It could be Mr. Barnes. It could even be Stig. Yes, that's it. 'Tis Stig. "Friend Zhang," soothes Dixon, "Stig is in a number of difficulties at the moment, but none include you. He could find neither the time nor the repose of spirit to cause you harm in any way that a Jesuit would describe as at all useful. The same is true of the other hands. Everyone is too busy." "He's here," insists the far too bright-eyed geomancer. "If he's not an axeman, then he must be one of the camp followers. Guy Spit, the pass-bank bully, one of those Vasquez brothers, even one of Mrs. Eggslap's girls. There is no limit to his ingenuity." If he were one of the ladies, Stig would have discovered that by now. Stig could be a confederate. "Captain, pray regard yourself." The Oriental operative thereupon grows bodily plumb and symmetric. His eyelids lower, his breathing decelerates, and presently he bows in apology. "You're right, of course. I'm behaving like Chef Armand with his duck. Which of us doesn't have an unseen persecutor? My case is probably no worse than your own." "Mine? Why?" Dixon again fumescent. I'm brisk as a bee these days, not a care in the world. Who'd be after me? Yet he avoids meeting Zhang's eyes. 'Tis widely assumed that you are here on behalf of the Jesuit Lemaire, co-engineer with Boscovich 15 years ago of yet another long, straight European line, the 2 degrees of latitude sliced across Italy from Rome to Rimini. Ever since then, Shah has flowed unremittingly across that miserable and poped and beduked and dismembered peninsula, Tuscany and Milan taken by Austria, Modena and Genoa by the French, despotism everywhere. Come, beg to differ. Even a simple child of the Pitt country knows that since that last peace treaty, why, Italy has been enjoying a long and wonderful era of prosperity and improvement. If this be despotism, go to Italy, scolds the captain, and look. Well, what about Maria Theresa then? The Jesuit protectress, a charming exception to the reign of brutality unchecked throughout the rest of Christendom, whilst your Jesuits go on attempting to eradicate feng shui from human awareness and to promote the inscription upon the earth of these enormously long straight lines, as in Lapland, in Peru, encyclopedists in expeditionary costumes squirting perfume about and taking these exquisitely precise sights whilst neglecting to turn their instruments, though degrees of longitude and latitude in name, yet in earthly reality are they channels marked for the transport of some unseen influence, one carefully assembled cairn, one oolite prism, one perfectly incised lead plate to the next. When these are disposed in a right line aimed at Ohio, it is natural to inquire what other scientific workings may lie in the area. Who'd benefit most? None, it would seem, but the consciously criminal in public life as private, who know how to tap into the unremitting torrent of Shah, roaring all day and all night, and convert it to their own uses, howling like a great boulevard of souls condemned to wander up and down the grim surfaces. Moreover, now interjects Mr. Everybeat, the court scryer, west of here, in the hills around Chiat and Monongahela, are secret lead mines which the Indians guard jealously. These deposits occur not as flats as in Durham, nor as veins as in Derbyshire, but rather as spherical caverns of wondrous regularity, filled with a galena remarkably pure, nearly free of other minerals. Perfect spheres of lead ore, that is, are situated inside those mountains, often dozens of yards across, exerting telluric effects unfathomable. Mr. Everybeat now produces a powerful glass, beneath which he places samples of finely divided rock. The limestone matrix through which these plumaginous orbs are distributed proves to be of a peculiar sort, already familiar to you. Oolite, Mason and Dixon suppose. Plenty out here every place you go, though they sure didn't need to import it from England. The surveyors have a look through the glass, which reveals a fine structure of tiny cells, each a sphere with another nested concentrically within, much like fish roe in appearance. your own linear emplacement of marker stones, whatever the reason, requires this sort of fine structure, weakly though precisely magnetic, lime in certain of the cells having been replaced with iron, whereas the famed Egyptian pyramids, whose ever mystical purposes beyond the simply funerary are much speculated upon, required limestone with another sort of fine structure altogether, containing numberless ancient shells, each made up of hundreds of square chambers arranged in perfect spirals. He has been out to the secret ore diggings at night amid a maze of hills and hollows, with sentries at every turn of the trail, outcroppings of limestone, whiter than they ought to be, shone in the starlight. He was met by native vendors with coils and foils and bars of lead, half-inch balls and small unflattering toy images, including those of the King and Mr. Franklin. The odour of sulphur was everywhere. The valleys were lit with small fires, at each of which ore was being burned to a regulus of the metal. Among the Indian smelters, proximity to fumes and dust had produced a number of ailments, from chronic melancholy to haunting without mercy to early death. They gaped at the scryer with blunted, sorrowing faces, some screaming words that no one offered to translate. Most unhappy, recalls Mr. Everybeat. Not at all the paradise one had been led to expect. Lead out here is a much-needed metal. Who controls lead controls the supply of ammunition for all sides in every dispute, not to mention a segment of the telluric energy market. Celeron's lead plates may indeed have been but the visible calibrating devices for a much more extensive engine below, perhaps an array of them, and a city to surround that, a Plutonian history unfolding far below our feet, all unknown to us above, but for occasional volcanoes and earth tremors. A complete, largely unsensed world, held within our own like a child in a womb, waiting for some summons to light. I considered myself not unacquainted with mania, records the Reverend. But until the spectacle I, and by now everyone else in camp, are witnessing Captain Zhang make of himself, I have known I collect as yet but few of its flowerings. I shall wear black robes, he declares. If El Lobo de Jesus may, why, so shall I. And he does. Spanish phrases increasingly creep into his conversation, and a small beard is one day visible upon his chin. Spend enough time in these mountains, as Captain Shelby avers, and sooner or later you see everything. This has happened out here before, though they usually change into real wolves. Well, I can't understand it, frowns Mason. The Chinese are known far and wide as a learned and sagacious people, quite beyond behaviour of this sort. Except, Dixon points out, that this one is insane, of course. Mason spreads his hands. Which of us can say? falls a few links short of a chain for fair. Yet, if he were telling the truth, and there were a dangerous Spaniard on his way here, 'twould be trouble for the party, without doubt. Either way, we might have to ask the captain to leave. Eh? Now they're chucking stilettos about. It's we again. Look ye, Dixon. Only you can get him to go. He already thinks you're a Jesuit agent. All you have to do is advise him to stay, and he'll do the opposite. If he believes that his enemy may arrive at any moment, he'll prefer to wait, won't he? Feeling safer, as who would not among armed Protestants? Andale mis juizo. 'Tis the Chinaman himself. It had better be. Axemen nonetheless go scattering, spilling coffee, clutching what's left of evening mess. Captain Shelby puts on a pair of Philadelphia pebble lenses to verify what he seems to be seeing. Mason, making encouraging gestures, urges Dixon, go on, in loud whispers, as he takes himself behind the cook's wagon. Dixon stares. The metamorphosis is alarming. Violet piping outlines the captain several times over against the perfect black of the soutane. He turns, revealing upon the back a gigantic and floridly rendered Chinese dragon in many colours, including heliotrope and Prussian blue. By the time he finally arrives in this camp, announces Captain Zhang, no one will be able to tell which is the real Zapazzo. We two will meet then in a struggle to the death, witnessed by all. The axemen will place bets. There will be beer and Dutch pretzels, a bottomless urn of coffee, depending how long the contest takes, perhaps a free luncheon as well. And if only one of you shows up? How could you ever be sure which one it was? Oh, and meaning no offence, for an insolent question like that, the real Zapazzo would have you publicly aflame in the nearest glade before you even understood what you'd done. His Chinese impersonator might wait but a few minutes more. Mighty harsh talk, Captain, says Shelby, but you know I'm a captain too. And now I wondered if I might just have a chat with you, captain to captain, as you'd say. You do me honour, Captain. What troubles us, Captain, about your Spanish friend is his way of wanting to kill anyone who doesn't agree with him. Hardly do around here, you see. Likely, after a short while, to be no one left. Withal, if one of us gets lucky and prevails, then we have the problem of a dead Jesuit, thousands of miles from home, inside a territory where he ought not to be. Others, some sooner or later with real power, will be making inquiries. In either case, you would have to flee. You are all safe, so long as I have. Thumb and index together, he twirls his wrist and is immediately holding up a dark red sphere about the size of a cherry. This, 'tis a pearl, not from beneath the sea, yet not from beneath the sea. Once it was a cyst growing within the brain of a cobra. None but experienced harvesters are able to tell which cobras bear them and which are not worth killing. The pearls are taken north into the Himalayan mountains, where they find use in the Tibetan medicine. Therefore, fear not the advent of the wolf, for here is the soul of the cobra, yet living, yet potent. I'll buy one, Dixon cries. Mason looks upward, patiently. That night, at Zhuja's exhibition, in torchlight, before the gleaming eyes of lovesick axemen, great Frederick has changed the face of war, created a new power upon the continent. Lo, the Prussian columns, keeping ever their intervals, and each precisely upon his mark, wheeling the angles of the hats, as of the wigs, calculated as to the field of vision for most efficient fire. When it is time for questions from the audience, began at Ramillies, in fact, notes Professor Vohm to all nearby. 'Twas well before the first Charles that men envied and sought to copy, nay, outdo, the loosed locks of the other half of humanity. All the history of England since that discredited dynasty has been about hair, and nothing else. The tied-back wigs of Marlborough's riflemen at Ramillies being so ideally Hanoverian, so perfected a compromise between the Stuart wantonness and the shorn Republican pate, that today any hair worn forward of the shoulders is but Jacobitism by means of coiffure, a wordless sedition that places in question all our hard-won arrangements. Do you mean, Shusha cries, a perfect balance between the feminine and the masculine? English soldiers, my brain, I must think. My good young woman, Captain Shelby flourishing his brows, whilst Europe was enjoying such tidy doings as yours, over here in our own collateral wars, we rather suffered one by one, in terror, alone among the league of trees unending. The only German precision we know of's right here, patting the octagonal barrel of his Lancaster rifle, as if 'twere the flank of a faithful dog. Geometry and slaughter, ejaculates Squire Halligast. The future of war, yet ancient as the mindless exactitudes of Alexander's phalanx. Perhaps, the Reverend suggests, we attribute to the armies of old a level of common belief long inaccessible to our own sceptical souls, making the Prussian example all the more mystical. Whom or what can any modern army believe in enough to obey? If not God, nor one's king, they submit, Shusha replies, to the preemptive needs of the maneuver. A soldier's faith at last must rest in the impurity of his own desires. What can Hansel possibly wish for that Heinz in front of him and Dieter behind and a couple of Fritzes on either side have not already desired, multiplied by all the ranks and files stretching away across the plain? The same blonde from down the street, the same pot of beer, the same sack of gold delivered by some elf for doing nothing. Who is unique? Who is not owned by someone? What do any of their desires matter if they can be of no use to the manoeuvre, where all is timed from a single pulse, each understanding no more than he must? "'Tis he!" screams Captain Zhang, leaping to the platform and taking a position as if astride a horse, extending his hands precisely before him. Zhuzha, her eyes very wide, swiftly undoes some buttons of her tunic to reach for a pistol of British make and a lady's powder flask with a stopper of striped blue Venetian glass, purring. "Captain, Captain, not in here. Run along now, take it outside. You have all the forest to play in." "Reveal yourself, wolf of Jesus! Zhang does not kill fools, nor may he in honour kill you, whilst you linger within that contemptible disguise." "What, this old wrongy? Will someone explain this to me? Don Foppo de Pinheado here seems upset." "Perhaps if Mademoiselle, in a gesture of good intent, would put aside her, cajoles Mr. Barnes. "We call it a pistol, the same as men do," twirling the weapon by its trigger guard. "Now that you have spoken to the lady in breeches, perhaps you could have a word with the man in skirts." "He's not a real Jesuit," Mason assures her. "Ah, perhaps all too real," the captain with a look of evil glee. "For suppose I was never Zhang, but rather Zapazzo all the time. Ha! Ha ha!" His laugh, though hideously fiendish enough, seems practised. "Or," replies Mr. Barnes, "that you are neither, but yet another damned fabulator, such as ever haunt encampments, white or Indian, every night, somewhere in this continent." Too many stories, possible stories. You may not have time enough to find out which is the right one. "Best thing's to draw up a book, for there's certain to be wagering upon the question," offers Guy Spit. Ethelma, downstairs, alone at the clavier, hair loosed, apostrophizes a thermometer, throughout which the listener may imagine a series of idiotic still life views. First of the thermometer, registering some low temperature, then of Ethelma, singing to it, then back to the thermometer again, and so forth. "Say, Mr. Fahrenheit, she doesn't treat me right." Advert to thermometer. "Wish you could warm up that lady of mine." Then back to Thelma, and so on. "Look at you on the wall. Don't have a care at all. Even though our love has plunged to -99. Now, Doctor, Celsius, and everyone else, yes. Say you've plenty to spare. Don't let us freeze, can't you? Send some degrees from wherever you are out there. Damn, Mr. Fahrenheit. Here comes another night. I shall once again be shivering through. With no help from your scale, 'tis all ice and hail, and I'll turn into a snowman too." "Where's Bray, Thelma?" Depew, self-mesmerized, having lost his way to the larder. Dreaming, as to what I can only say with certainty that 'tis not of me. Romance, you did your best. But not my worst. End of chapter.